Wow, this is fantastic. Thank you so much, Helen. And but we're not finished yet. No, no, we can't go home. There is more. And still, I would like, sometimes you feel either the best has been or the best is yet to come, but this is all awesome and full of fabulousness. And I am just so grateful to have had today and share it with everyone and all of our end-of-life care partners that have put so much effort in. I'd just like to take a moment to give a brief applaud to them silently, obviously. But I would really firmly like to not waste any time and move straight on to our next phenomenal speaker. And her name is Dr. Kathryn Mannix. Kathryn is talking about a skill set to help us navigate conversations that so often can feel quite daunting, and what can help us feel more confident to get starting with these conversations. So Kathryn is a best-selling author, and she's written With the End in Mind and also Listen, where Kathryn talks about wanting us basically to understand dying more, fearing it less, and to listen better. So I'd like to warmly welcome the stage to Kathryn, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, I've had to change the lighting because it's going dark here in Northumberland. So I hope that you can see me and that you can hear me reasonably clearly. What an absolutely amazing day this has been. I'm absolutely blown away. I was also very, very pleased to see how many people wrote the word listen or something about listening to the question about what do you do well, or what do you want to improve, what do you want to take away from this? Because I'm going to talk a little bit really about those conversations and the central point of listening. What do we do so we can listen well to what matters most to those people that we're serving? When we think about these conversations, I think that we have a tendency to perhaps over-recognize some of the trickiness, the courage that it's going to require, or the skill that we're going to need to draw on, and how we might feel that it's a bit daunting or difficult or even dangerous sometimes to embark on these conversations. And we see advertisements, don't we, for challenging conversations, courageous conversations. We know that what we're going to invite is the expression of difficult to hold emotions. And as a consequence of that and the language that we use, like courageous conversations, challenging conversations, I think we might find ourselves metaphorically clipping on our armor, getting ourselves ready to do something that's really tough. And it is true that these conversations can feel a little bit daunting, but that isn't actually the conversation's fault. So I'd like us to think about a paradigm shift where instead of us coming in with our armor and our kit and our equipment and our skills, what we bring is ourself and our tenderness, because these are not clinical conversations. These are conversations between two people about something deeply personal, deeply human, about what matters most. And I think that if we start to label the conversations themselves differently, we might bring ourselves into them in a slightly different way. So I started talking about them as tender conversations quite a long time ago now, really in defiance of the challenging conversations agenda. Because I think these are a partnership. This is about the person that I'm talking to and me as people. And that what we're doing is something together. It's a shared endeavour. And it's our joint responsibility to find our way through this conversation. And so when I started trying to distill the essence of that, I started off thinking about a toolkit. And then I realised that actually that doesn't really work, because with a toolkit, you use a tool and then you put it down and you pick up the next tool. Whereas in a conversation, what happens is that we enter the conversation and then we start to build and add and layer. And what's happening is that each of us is making sense of each other's ideas, listening to each other's questions, listening to each other's answers, and taking time to think. And it seemed to me that rather than a toolkit, perhaps the metaphor for these conversations is a dance, where we're working together and we're holding a space for the exchange of those ideas. And we're both trying our best. We might be great dancers, but we might be like me, not very good dancers at all. That doesn't matter, because we both know that we're trying our best. So if we tread on each other's toes, if we stumble and fall over, if we fall over and pull the other person down as well, in a dance, we both know, oops, I'm really sorry. We help each other up and we help each other to continue. And these tender conversations, if they unravel a bit, if the good intention and the compassion is clear, we can help each other to regroup and to continue. So tender rather than difficult conversations, I think, have some key principles. And I'm going to talk about these in this order, but actually it's interesting how much of this overlaps with the skill set that I see Kathryn's already tweeted now, so that we can comment on the framework. And what's lovely about, I think, essential truths is it doesn't matter who describes them, they'll name the same phenomena, because the truth is the truth, whichever way we're looking at it. So I'm going to think about how important it is that we invite without insisting, that we listen to understand each other. And that's been mentioned several times already today, that importance of listening, not in order to tick a box, but to be really, really sure that we've understood what the other person is saying. So we're holding ourselves in a attention of curiousness. We're using questions to try to probe deeper into what the person is telling us about. And if those big emotions arrive, we accept them, we allow them, we are companions to them. We don't try to shut them down. And these conversations will include silence whilst people are doing their thinking. We need to finish safely, and we need to look after ourselves, because we need to do this repeatedly. So there's something about us as individuals, as members of a caring team, of a caring workforce, as family members who are working with people who are vulnerable or in difficulty. However we come to this, if we don't look after ourselves, we can't continue to support those important people. So let's think about that invitation. Something that really matters, something that really matters to both of us. Can I just remind everybody to check that you're on mute, please? That when we're inviting, we are going to accept yes, but not now. And we're even going to accept no as an answer. So is it okay if we talk about, it would be really helpful for me, Dad, if you would let me know some more about what your wishes are for the future. Or sometimes we need to tell news and we want to share it with our families. And I've had lots of correspondence from my book about dying from families who say, we're desperate to talk about this with a particular member of our family, but they are anxious about entering the conversation. How do you get in? So this is how you get in. You don't go in to start it, you go in to suggest it, and then you accept the other person's acceptance of when and where, because it might not be right now. But once we start, the really key thing is the way that we listen. So forget about what we're going to say, because our task here is not about what we're going to say. Our task here is about what we're going to understand of the other person's perspective. What is it that matters most to you today? What's going to be most important for you this week? When you think about the future, what are the things that matter most? What do I need to know about you to be the best nurse, physio, doctor, companion that I can be for you during this conversation? And we can't respond until we've listened, but not just listened, reflected on what the person said and understood. And as I was thinking about this, I realized I've talked about dancing for a long, long time, because I've talked to medical students for many years about the need to ask questions, probe a little more deeply with a second question, and then offer a summary statement or offer back the summary of what I've understood so far for correction, so that we don't gradually drift apart in meaning during this conversation, the question, summary waltz. And what we'll see if we are observing a master communicator in action is lots of silence, lots of questions, lots of curiosity, and the tolerance of uncertainty. Curiosity Children are our guide for this. They are our role models, because being curious just allows any possibility. Children don't mind. They just want to know more. And that's the attitude we're bringing into these conversations. When somebody starts to tell us what matters most to them, we want to know more about that. We want to understand it better. We want to know what it's been like to be you, taking this illness journey so far, so that we can be a good companion to you as you move further forward. One thing that's really important to think about here is that when we're inviting people to tell us their story or to mull over what matters most to them, there are two listeners. We are listening, we're paying attention to their story, we're hearing it, but they are also hearing it. And we've all had that experience, haven't we, of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's some really big deal going on in our head and it's swimming around. There are lots of loose ends, there are lots of bits to it, and we can't quite work out how to think about it. It's disturbing us, but we just can't sort it into order. Being invited by somebody who listens to us with courteous attention allows us to start to frame that story, and we offer it a little bit at a time. And we hear people saying, don't we, oh, hang on, no, that didn't happen next, this happened next. And they reshuffle the order as they're telling the story. Saying it out loud to us helps them to get it right and make sense of it too. It starts to tie up all those loose ends. So I wanted to think a little bit about using questions to reach a fuller picture. And there are two sorts of questions that I'd like us to think about. The questions that help us to understand the current situation are questions like, while that was happening, what else were you thinking? Or what did you say? How did it make you feel? What did you do? What did they do? So that thinking, doing, feeling, physical sensations and emotions, that's lifted from my cognitive therapy practice. And very often we'll notice people will tell us all about what they did, but nothing about how it felt whilst they were going through it. Or they'll tell us all about their symptoms, but nothing about their emotional response to their symptoms. So thinking about thoughts and emotions, physical sensations and actions or omissions is a really good way of collecting a balanced story from a person. And as they're telling it, asking them now to reevaluate it. What do you make of it all now that we're thinking about it together? Is there anything that we could be missing about this? Could there be a different way of interpreting the things that have been going on? We as healthcare professionals, social care professionals, people who are going to turn up to an afternoon of what matters most conversations, we have something in common. It is a common framework and it's a common burden. And it's that we're all helpers. And helpers want to solve. We want to make it better. We want to move from the current distress into the future to sort it out. So I want to challenge us to just, hey, stop now. Let's finish getting the full story. Let's really understand how it is and how difficult it might feel before we move to any notion of trying to step forward or solve. And then we need to think about the fact that if we can think of an easy fix for this, then this intelligent person we're talking to will also have been able to think of that easy fit. And if it was really an easy fit, they'd have solved the dilemma by now. So when we're talking about possible ways forward, that's not for us to do, it's for us to facilitate. What has this person already thought about so far? Have you tried anything? Did you get any other advice? Is there any aspect of this complicated situation that could be changed? And if you could change that little bit, how might that affect the other things? When you've dealt with difficult things in the past, have you had any experience that you could apply here? And the $1,000 question, what would you advise a friend? Because it's astonishing how often a person who feels completely stuck in their current situation can think of absolutely tip-top advice they would give a friend in the same situation. So rather than us being the people who solve it, we become the companions to help the person to be the architect of their own solutions. And as they're talking, as they're thinking about this difficult situation, distress may very well arise. And again, we're not there to fix it. And by saying, oh, I'm sure it's not going to be as bad as all that, or don't worry, I know they're going to understand, that kindly meant reassurance is actually saying, oh, don't be upset in front of me now, please. And it closes down the space and it tells the person that their emotions are not welcome. It's really hard for us, but we need to just be companions in distress. During COVID, we've had to learn to do this, and we're not in the room. We have to do it down the phone. So we need to allow people to feel their feelings and yet let them know that we are still present. And so we need to say things that they don't have to come out of their thinking to hear. So bland things like, I'm still here, I'm still listening, take your time. Or empowering things like, this is really hard, but I'm not going anywhere. This is so difficult. You take your time. And by allowing them to feel their distress, they can process it and come to a place where they can think. And when we're thinking, we usually don't talk. So what we need to do is to be a silent companion and allow the silence. And what we know from analysing conversations that are filmed between people is that whilst one of us might be thinking, oh my goodness, how long do I need to be silent for? This is lasting forever. The person who's thinking didn't notice there was a silence because they were so busy in their mind processing what is going on. So we need to let silence do its work and respect it, holding the silence, perhaps giving tissues or a cup of tea, but stop ourselves as we feel that bubbling up inclination to give a bit more explanation or to excuse what's happened so far or add details of all the treatments that we tried before we decided that the treatments weren't working. Silence and our companionship in it is one of our key skills in these tender conversations. And as the conversation needs to draw to an end, we need to be aware of that. And in palliative care, one of the things that happens is we think we're going to talk for a particular amount of time, and then we see our patient's energy just starting to fade. So we may, in fact, need to wrap up much more quickly than we'd anticipated. So it's helpful if we identify time constraints from the very beginning. You know, are you okay for time now? Or actually, I've only got 10 minutes now. If you think it's more than 10 minutes worth, I've got more time than that tomorrow. Shall we meet then? Or do you need to just tell me now and then tomorrow we'll have more time to deal with it? And then share responsibility for the timekeeping. Promise each other that you'll give each other a 10-minute warning. That was a revolutionary for me, who was terrible at timekeeping in my cognitive therapy sessions. I'm trying to do that subtle look at the watch, you know, without not really looking. So help each other by acknowledging that we are going to keep an eye on the time, so that when we're getting ready to end, we're checking that we are moved back from that emotionally vulnerable space that perhaps both of us have been in, that we're okay, that we're safe, that we express appreciation that the person has trusted us with that information. And then we future orientate what's the next steps going to be. How are you getting home? Who are you going to speak to next? How are you going to make contact with that person that you need to talk to? And do we need to meet again to continue talking? We need to look after ourselves. And sometimes that means that even though we can see a tender conversation needs to be taken, now might not be the right time, or I might not be the right person or the person with the right space for it. Sometimes we need to say, no, I wish I could, but today I can't, or this week I can't, or right now I can't. Or I can't take that on, but I know somebody who I will ask. Would it be all right if I talk to? Would it be all right if I ask so-and-so to take this on with you? It's really important that we value ourselves as much as everybody else that we're looking after, otherwise we will burn out. So one of the things that I did during COVID was to go back to my local trust to work for staff support and communication skills training about breaking unwelcome news. And it was really interesting listening to people talking about how they looked after themselves, as we talked about how important it was that they took the time to look after themselves. People who were using mindfulness, including people using apps like the Calm app on their phone. people who just wanted to have a cup of tea, or others who just needed to see something that wasn't the hospital, to look out of a window to see the sky, to see nature, or to look at photos of happy times or friends on their phone. Some people, like the Professor Talbots of this world, who want to listen to music, and other people who want to talk to somebody, they phone a friend, or they just need to be somewhere to be quiet and feel strong emotions. All these different ways of recentering that are really important. I went to a ward to meet a physiotherapist, and her colleague said to me, "Oh, she'll be back in 10 minutes. She's walking around the pond." And in fact, she was in the park across the road from the hospital, because one circuit of the pond was a 10-minute walk, and that was their agreed debriefing after they'd had an emotionally difficult moment. And this ward team were looking after each other by making sure that everybody had time to walk around the pond. And then taking care of ourselves afterwards too. What are we doing to make sure that we are using these experiences healthily? Reflection, or writing, or journaling, or supervision time that we use well. And again, in supervision, our colleagues bring their distress. Do we listen to their distress and create space for them to say, "I'm worried I didn't handle that as well as I could have done"? Or do we close them down with well-meant reassurance? "I'm sure you were great. Oh, that family really loved you." No, if somebody wants to talk about their misgivings, then we sit back and we allow them, and we are their companions in their distress. But making sure we're taking relaxation time so that we're not constantly burning with all of those hormones that are related to stress. So I'm going to wind up so that we can perhaps talk to each other a little bit. I wonder how you feel about the idea of being tender in your conversations. What would it feel like for us to be listening without judging the merits of the things that the person is saying, without reassuring them if they have misgivings, without using our desire to fix things and putting it into practice? And I think we've already started this conversation. What two things will we all do differently in our important conversations, just to see what happens? What experiments do you think we might try over the next couple of weeks? So I'm going to leave it there, because I'm aware that we're running towards the end of the day. People have been very attentive for a long, long time. And I think we're getting ready now just to quieten down and finish the day off.
Well, I'm sure everyone would love to thank you. Kathryn, it's always inspiring listening to you. We put a note on both of your books. I would heavily recommend both of them. And thank you for making this a wonderful ending, although we're not quite there. It's always full of secret little surprises. I have to thank a glowing young member of our think tank who started when she was a medical student. Just at the end, she did some sort of experience before graduating. She's now graduated, I think it's called FY1, but anyway, she's a junior doctor, and her name is Eve Barnes. She very kindly offered, as part of our think tank, to, she's got the patience of a saint and is incredibly nimble, has managed to glean all of the chat information and has done fast and fabulous and furious things with it, into putting it into a word cloud and PowerPoint. So I'd like to give her, as all glowing young news stars need, a little couple of minutes. So I'm going to share, but Eve would love to basically present, and then I thought maybe, Kathryn, we could pull out some of the core themes. Whilst I'm just about to sort of share, and Eve starts speaking, if I could just pinpoint back to what Kathryn was asking, could you tell us at least one point that you've learnt today that you are going to commit to doing differently, or that fills you full of sort of love and enthusiasm that you've learned today? And if you could, not quite in the pause and pounce way, but just pounce it in, and we can draw on those as well. So right now, further ado, I'm going to try and share the slides for Eve, and thank you.
Amazing, thank you, Kathryn. Hi, I'm literally just going to talk for 2 seconds. Yeah, I was trying to compile all of the comments and amazing things that have been said, both by the speakers and you guys in the chat, and I couldn't really think of a way of getting all of it into one slide, so I just tried to come up with sort of keywords that seemed to be coming out, to put them into a word cloud, and then some of the points that felt really salient to me. Obviously, I'm sure everyone will have their own sort of special standout moments from the really inspirational talks we've had. But yeah, so I don't know if we can just go back.
Sorry, yes.
That's all right. So I think we've talked about such a wide variety of topics, and I think what this cloud really shows is that actually they're all underpinned by, you know, unity in intention and in sort of inspiration for moving forward. And, you know, thinking of what Chris was saying about being a follower and having something to really get behind and move forward with. And I think if we can take just, you know, a handful of these words and move forward with them in our conversations, then, you know, we'll be able to bring these conversations into people's homes and into our wider communities and workplaces. So yeah, like I said, I'm sure people have had other words that will come to their minds, but I think the ones that came most for me were the follower, family, permission, and confidence. Those would be my top 4. And then for the ones that couldn't be summarized into one word, because there were some really amazing questions and comments and things, but I think you are enough. I just put that in big bright writing at the bottom, because, you know, we are enough and we can do this, and it is important. And yeah, I see you all, and thank you so much.
Brilliant, thank you, Eve. And any final reflections, Kathryn, because you are brilliant at pulling things together and summarising, and just wondered, I've certainly, there's just been a passion and a joy, and I've loved hearing everybody, reading all of the chat, and hearing everybody's stories, but from your perspective.
It's been absolutely brilliant, hasn't it? I think as we were going through the day, I've been scribbling things down, thinking I need to mention this, and I need to mention this, and I can't mention them all. But there were some things that stood out for me, and Chris's I see you, I think actually just gets to the heart of what matters to you movement. It is all about that we can be guilty of thinking that we see people and actually not seeing their heart and soul. And that's what these questions and this stance of curiosity is all about. And so when I look at the word cloud, I took a screenshot of the word cloud so that I wouldn't lose it. So where's it disappeared to? I'm really interested to see that permission is down at the bottom, and immediately above it is rule breaking. And one of the things that I really love about being able to help people to do what matters most to them is how often sometimes we do need to bend the rules, and that some of us are more anxious about that than others, but that actually sometimes it's better, I think, to seek forgiveness than to ask permission. And I think that that's probably been one of my rules of life. And I'm sorry to all of my colleagues who are on this call who are nodding or shaking their heads about that. But the idea of permission, I think, then comes down to that same thing about invitation, which comes into the framework we were looking at before about, you know, before you begin and how you begin, by arrangement. So through the whole day, the theme has felt to me that this is all about collaboration. It's about people meeting people rather than professionals meeting patients.
Thank you. Once again, I suppose my reflections are that it's been such a pleasure and well-needed rest almost. I know it's been a completely action-packed day, but I feel somehow emotionally well rested by hearing all the sharing and the calmness and the kindness and the appreciation of one another, whatever that's been. And it's been really rather sort of fabulous. It's almost been sort of soaking it in, better than a spa day, I would say, and I haven't had one of those for years and years, but it's just felt really, really fantastic. I suppose in the summing up part, which, as you've said, is difficult because we can't possibly There were so many moments of fabulousness and things that have been shared and said, and I'd just like to commit, so this will be recorded if you didn't, or has been recorded if you didn't hear right at the beginning, and it will be shared on the RCGP website for a link. We're also, Max Watson, who's been a fabulous member of the RCGP and End of Life Care Partners think tank. I can see his little face on the call. He's always calm and collected and offers pearls of wisdom, has come up with something called a paper tiger. So we're going to try and basically, although there will be an extended sort of filming of it, we'll also try and do a sort of summarized version that will be easy to share with some of the sort of key points and bits and pieces, tools, tips, tricks, all the sort of interested parts collated. So we'll be looking forward to do that. Do potentially give us a little bit of time. It won't be tomorrow, just for the warning, but we'll be doing it as soon as we possibly can. As Karen's already shared in the Twitter parts, we'd love some feedback on the tools. So that's something we'd really like to develop, but we would need the feedback from you because we want to do it in a true QI style, because that's Karen's area of expertise, and making sure that we do it kind of develop it for you. The other part is, and please do continue putting what you're committing to in the chat, because we'll be collating all that too and then sharing it back in the fabulousness. We will also be creating a community of practice. So we don't quite know, in Max's words, what that will look like yet, but that's okay because we can develop it together, and we'd like to invite you to actively participate as much as you'd like to and able to. And we'll be also sharing the format once we get, we'll be sending out how you can start contributing and connecting with it when we send out the other information. And by virtue of being on the call, we're taking that as permission to contact you and then be able to share how you can get involved if you want to. If you'd like any more information immediately, then do put your email also in the chat and we can collect that and come back to you. But that will be an area where we can develop together. So this was the starting process that we all as End of Life Care Partners wanted to start off on, this beautiful journey of how do we create and evolve these What Matters Most conversations. We don't have necessarily a key ambition of what we want that to look in mind. We want that to be a journey together and something that we can develop together. So please, please look forward to seeing you all and being able to sort of come back to you on how to get involved. I would also, I think it's a really important moment and so often forgotten. There are a couple of people that are very much behind the scenes and they never take any credit. So there are a few members, which are Erica and Rob from the RCGP, who've worked tirelessly behind the scenes of trying to do lots of the organisation from the RCGP perspective. And also Tom gets a very special member who comes to the think tank and has also done just so much in the organisation. So, and also, sorry, Stephen. Stephen has been an amazing force of nature, who's the St Giles Medical and did the filming. He's done so much for us. He's developed the What Matters Most conversations website. If someone could put that in the chat as well, because it's really worth, we'll be sharing some of the information and things already are on there, but it's a great port of information. We've got a charter for What Matters Most. We've got different little videos, tools, tricks, and we'll update that as well. So Stephen has been with us from the think tank. He's given his time endlessly to us and has done so much organisation and is, as you can see from the learning disabilities video, is a brilliant short filmmaker. I would like to thank all of them and all of our End of Life Care Partners, all of our presenters today and our chairs, Sarah and Helen, thank you so much. And lastly, but definitely not least, I would like to thank everybody for giving up their afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as all of we have. And it's really lovely to see you and thank you. And see, Erica's right on cue. So without further ado, 5 minutes spare time for a loo break if you're going on to something, and wishing you a really great evening and thank you again.